Okay, everybody, we have got our favorite historian back with us, Raffi, of course. Welcome back.
I am. I love to be here, love history, love TV.
Yes, well,
Perfect Valentine.
We love you being on the show. That's amazing. So, okay, we have got so much to talk about. Let's start. Where do you want to start? Kind of the historical aspect of it?
Sure. How about some different ways that people have seen love over time? Because Valentine is about love. And you know how economists talk about supply and demand? Well, historians talk about change over time.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, something like love that we feel is so, sort of absolute has actually changed over time. You look in the ancient world, there were definitions that varied. For example, with the origin with the cosmos in ancient Greece, there was this notion that it's connected like the heart. It has a moment of stress and a moment of release, a moment of stress and a moment of release. But early on, you have the association of love and heart.
Yes.
And then you have Plato, who writes a symposium and quotes Socrates in love, meaning with honor versus dishonor in the context of citizenship.
Okay.
And he also talks about love in that same symposium, talks about love as something that is self-actualization, self-discovery. You see that notion of love still out there today.
Yeah.
And then as Christianity comes around, you have St. Paul. St. Paul talks about subserving or putting down the carnal love, the bodily love, for the more heavenly love that you're supposed to really go for. That's, of course, in the name of Jesus, right, who sacrificed his body to be able to go to heaven and have the greater love that you're supposed to have, that's supernatural. So that's the way that you see love evolve over time. But my favorite is in the Enlightenment period in the 18th century, because in that period you have Rousseau, who's a philosopher, and he talks about order and balance. You must be ordered and balanced, because that's a lot of what the Enlightenment is about, reason, order, in order to love properly to someone else. Because if you love them properly and you're balanced yourself, you'll strive to be better, perfect yourself. Have you ever heard of someone, though, say, you know, that other person makes me better?
Oh, yeah,
That's the notion that comes from, believe it or not. So that's how I would think about love differently over time, but they all influence us still today. All those loves are still out there today.
That is so crazy.
Absolutely.
So something interesting that you sent me were some really kind of cartoons or sketches or things that you might have seen
that's right.
during the period of the 1800s, late 1800s into the early 1900s.
Different ways of love. And if you look, when you look at those things closely, you see those different loves reflected on there, including those of citizenship, particularly political cartoons, etc. Absolutely. Now, you can see that love portrayed in different ways. And how about today, of course, we portray our love with chocolate, right?
Of course.
And I brought a bunch of these different ingredients. So let's look at what chocolate did over time and how it connects with love. So first, when you had chocolate in Central America, which is where it originates, it was a bitter drink. But it was still associated with these rituals that were supernatural, having kind of these magical powers, if you will. They would have it in Central America because it was bitter. With chili, which think about it, if you put dark chocolate and chili together, today we still do it, mole.
I was about to say.
Yeah, it is kind of based on that same. They go together, and they might add honey to it as well, right? Here, got some Texas local honey too, of course. Got to be local here. Now, what happened though is when Europeans arrived, they were after sugar, which was growing in the Caribbean. So I brought the sugar. This is white gold, as it was known back then. It really was known that way because it was so expensive. It was a luxury product. Many wars were fought over sugar, and so because it was a luxury product, and it was added to chocolate along with cinnamon. Look at these giant cinnamon sticks.
I was looking at this earlier, and they smell so good.
And they would have these big, fancy chocolate houses in Europe. So it became associated with something luxurious. And think about the ways we're defining chocolate over time, because it got added to chocolate, unlike the previous Central Americans. Well, then what happens is in England, you have a company called Cadbury, and you have the Swiss with Lindt that are some of the first to make chocolate hard as opposed to just drinking it. And with Cadbury, you're the first time that you're going to have the heart-shaped box. And the heart-shaped box was in the 19th century, the Victorian period, the era from which you said the cartoons were portraying love. The most romantic period is known as a romanticism period, if you look at literature and such. And in the heart-shaped box at the time, what you might have is a lot of poetry and love, love poems back and forth, love letters back and forth to keep it in there. So the heart-shaped box and chocolate came associated together. Now, here you go. Why don't you have one? Whitman's here, we got here. Is one of the originals as well. And how about Hershey's Kisses? What about Hershey's Kisses?
Of course.
Is that literally not saying love and chocolate together? Kisses? And these things are 100 years old, 100 plus years old. So we've been taking steps toward associating chocolate and that magical power. It was used in rituals in Central America. Europeans also noticed that it gives you a boost of energy. It does have some caffeine in there.
There you go.
And so that energizing was also seen as sort of an aphrodisiac of sorts when you think about it. So it all comes together with the development of chocolate and the development of love.
That is so interesting. Oh my goodness, because we just think about it as chocolate. But thank you for sharing the history and joining us today.
Thank you.
Of course. Well, hey, folks, we do have to take a quick break, but we'll be right back after this.